we are recording. And today we're going to be talking about accessibility. Um, and Professor Miller, did you ever come to one of our accessibility workshops before?
Was that is that I don't know.
Okay.
So I was
If
like,
it
I don't think I've been to this before, but it's the one where like you can for your exams, if a student needs extended time, right?
Yes,
You can
that is part of it. That is
that's
part
part
of
of it. Okay, so
it.
right. So I know how that, and I've been to a workshop for that, but
Okay.
no, so I don't think I've come to one that's fully about accessibility and inclusion.
Okay, okay. So extended time on an exam is certainly part of accessibility. Today we're going to focus a little bit more on the online classroom content for accessibility. So things like a PowerPoint presentation, like I have right here, and how we can make things like PowerPoints more accessible, uh, Microsoft Word files more accessible. We're also going to talk a little bit about accessibility on Blackboard and on in PDFs. Um,
Okay.
so the way I like to do it is I like to kind of show the common mistakes. So
Mm-hmm.
we have this title screen right here in PowerPoint, and later we're going to go through the accessibility checker, which will actually pass this, but this is not considered um, perfect. It's not considered like very accessible. Um,
Okay.
do you want to guess why?
Um, because I don't know. So the screen that you have up front, right? The
Yeah,
creating.
this was so this was a tough thing for me. This was a mistake I did a lot too.
Hmm.
But the reflection is considered not too accessible. Even though
Oh,
visually it's clear, there's certain conditions where this can kind of cause like an irritation to someone.
okay. And now that you point that out, that does make sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
the mirror image. Yeah, that
right.
yes, I can see that how that could be a problem for some.
Yeah. And also, I always like to start to remind everyone that there's no magic button for accessibility.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I'm still searching for it, and if I ever find it, I will certainly tell everyone about it. It's kind
Okay.
of like a mindset that we need to have at the very beginning when we're creating our content. It's easier to have the accessibility mindset right from the very beginning. That way, we don't end up going back and spending even more time recreating our content. And I always like to, um, so again, we have a little bit of an Easter egg hunt. Uh, so I have some errors on the different slides, and we'll pick them all up at the end with the accessibility checker. But when you spot them, please call them out. For example, we have over here, we have black text highlighted in gray. That's like
Mm-hmm.
considered really bad because it's hard to read. The contrast is way off, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
go over a little bit more of that in a bit.
Oh, okay.
So I love this example because I used to wear contact lenses, and I feel like this type of example, it gets me right into the mindset of thinking what is accessible design and
Mm-hmm.
what is not accessible design, right? So these are three different contact lens cases. Um, and my favorite when I wore contact lenses was this one on the right, the
Yes.
green and white one. Because on the right and left eye, we had different sizes, different prescriptions, all that good stuff. And if you go in, if and this is new, this next slide. If you go into this, that makes it very
Mm-hmm.
clear, right? It's kind of this is
Mm-hmm.
actually better than a lot of people would see. Um,
Yes.
but we could see the green and the white. It makes it very clear which is on the right, which is on the left. The blue, is going to be tough, and the one that looks like eyeglasses, this one's really cute, but now it's kind of hard to tell which is right, which is left. So that just starts to get me into that mindset of thinking, although all three of these work, which one works
Mm-hmm.
the best, right?
Yeah.
Another example I like to think of to help me get into the mindset of universal design, right? Um, so the first one, steps, right? We see this everywhere. We have you can move high volume of people. It's pretty cheap to build, right? If we're thinking in like a budgetary type of mindset for like building a school or a building or anything like that. The second one is elevators, which as we can see from what the MTA is doing and spending, they are very
Mm-hmm.
expensive and very difficult to build. Although they are the most accessible, we have the issue of expense, and also you can't move a high volume of people, right?
Right.
And the third one is the one that is considered the most universal in terms of mobility, is the ramp, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
as long as the ramp meets the requirements, people with mobility issues can use the ramp, but it's still much cheaper than elevators, just a little bit more expensive than steps, and you can still move high volumes of people. So as we develop our classroom content, we also want to think in this mindset, right? We don't want to go all the way to creating something like the elevator where we're spending a lot of extra time, a lot of expenses, and then it's going to require a lot of time and maintenance. We want to think of something kind of like the ramp.
Mm-hmm.
So, just keep that analogy in mind as we go forward.
Okay.
And all material must be accessible to all. I know, Professor Miller, you're definitely one of the more open-minded professors. Many times I get
Yeah.
the argument of, well, I never encountered anyone. Why do I have to do it? I'll just redo my class if I encounter someone who's visually impaired or someone who is hearing impaired or something like that. Or I'll remake my website. I hear that all the time. Um, and I just wanted to remind everyone that not only is it legally required, but it is also, the morally correct thing to do. We don't do separate but equal when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
accessibility, or we shouldn't do that with anything. And
Yeah.
I know this is a little bit of a dramatic comparison, but this is usually the reminder that I tell everyone, just so they stop with the, oh, why do I have to do it? It's the law. It's the morally correct thing to
Absolutely. I agree 100%
do. Mhm.
with you, David.
Okay, so just a little agenda for what we're going to be covering today. We're going to speak about the font styles, sizes, colors, all about fonts. We're going to go through the accessibility options in Blackboard, and we're going to look at the accessibility checker in Word and PowerPoint, which is all across Microsoft Office. And then Michael from ARC is going to show us a little bit about PDFs. Professor Miller, have you ever worked with Michael before? I'm so sorry, I totally forgot the
Yeah.
introductions.
No, no, I've never worked with Michael before. So this is my first, yes, introduction and yeah,
Oh, nice
workshop
to
with
meet you, Professor Miller. Do
yes,
you have any students currently registered with ARC in any of your courses?
I do. Yes, I have, I think, a total of 7 students across my 3 courses this semester.
Gotcha. Awesome. So hopefully what we covered today would help those 7 students and even the rest of your student population too.
Yes, I hope, I know it will. I'm sure it will. So I look forward. Thank you.
Great. Let's see. So a little bit about font styles. And Michael, feel free to jump in on this part because I know this is a bit
Yeah,
of your
definitely.
specialty.
So let me share my screen with you.
Sure.
Sure.
Cool. So does it pop up for you?
Yes.
It
Okay,
does.
awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to briefly talk about typefaces, or you may know them as fonts. So with typefaces and fonts, there are certain fonts that may be more accessible than others. So a simple way is that we just tell like faculty members and professors what the accessible fonts are and what are the not accessible ones. But to help you understand it, I want to explain why certain fonts are a little bit more accessible than others. So there's a lot of different like factors that go into making a specific font. So we have like the height of it, the weight. So the weight, when I refer to is how thick the line is, the spacing in between each letter, the strokes, like that's the whole like line between from like the top all the way to the bottom that we consider the stroke. But one of the most important things that we want to look for is called a serif. So each font would be classified for the most part between serif and sans serif. So serif fonts typically have this little tail, this little accent mark at the end of like most of the letters. So you notice on the A, there's a little tail. On like the P, there's like a little tail right here. Even on the N up top, there's like another little tail. And those are just called a serif. So a sans serif font means that is similar to these fonts, but there's no little accent tails at the end of each letter. And those little small details, when you add them up, begin to make certain fonts a little bit more inaccessible. So I'm gonna move down. So this right here is a very common example. So Times New Roman. If you were to zoom into it, so let's just zoom all the way in. You notice that the A on Times New Roman has a little serif accent right here, the B, the D, the E, same thing with the lowercase. So if you scroll down, has a little tail right here. And as we add it up, so right here, this is an example of a common use font that most professors tell students to use as a default. But believe it or not, even though this is one of the better fonts, it's still considered inaccessible because those little accents right here. So if you read on the right-hand side, you may begin to see how a student with dyslexia or visual impairment may have trouble reading that because of all those little extra details just thrown into the individual characters that when you put them into a paragraph, begin to add up. Now that's different than a sans serif font. So in this example, we have Verdana. So you notice that on this one, it's just a straight A. There's no tail at the end of it. So this would be considered sans serif. The B is just straight, no little tail. D, same thing. Same thing with the lowercase. If you look at the lowercase a, there's no little accent tail at the end of it, and so forth. So if we begin to look at it right here, we notice that because those little small details got removed from it, it actually helps a little bit more with legibility, and students with dyslexia may be able to read it a little bit easier, or any type of other visual impairment. Now, on another spectrum of it, if you have a font that's also like has no tails, that's sans serif right here, a lot of times having like an entire paragraph in bold or just a really heavy weight to it can also provide inaccessibility issues. So you notice right here, a lot of the letters are really thick and really heavy to the eye. So if you were to read this right here, that's extremely overwhelming for you to see. So visually, that creates a lot of inaccessibility issues. And on another example right here, so if you scroll down, so this one's the complete opposite, where the previous one, we had a very heavyweight font. Now this one is extremely thin to you. So even though it's not as heavy as the other one, because it's so thin, it begins to get blurred into the background with the white, which starts to create inaccessibility issues because we start to have issues reading it because it's so thin and everything becomes a little bit jumbled together. And then the last one right here is just a little sample comparing each one. So from here, we could begin to see which ones are more accessible compared to another. So for example, the first one is really heavy. The second one is really thin. The third one is not bad. This is a common example, Times New Roman, but compare that to Verdana. Verdana or even Arial provides a lot more visual clarity for students with visual impairments or dyslexia, for example. And then you can even take it a step further. So like right now I have Arial on this sample, but if we add more spacing in between each line, it provides us more space to provide better visual clarity. So students with dyslexia may have an easier time separating between each line. So it creates a lot easier for them to read. Okay, Davis, I'm gonna hand it back over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Michael. Let me just share my screen again. All right, so yeah, that was a very good explanation of serif and sans serif. It took me a long time to understand and remember the difference. But yeah, the serif means the curves. That's what it is. The
Yeah.
little tails.
So the serif is like little tails on each
And
individual character. Sans serif means there's no tails on them.
yeah, so sans is like it means without, right? It's like
Correct.
Latin for
Yep.
without. Okay.
Without.
Yeah. So yeah, we try to keep it as sans serif fonts. And if you look at like large print books, they're usually in sans serif for that very reason. They are easier to read. They are more accessible. And we like to go with the rule of at least 14 pixels. And we also want to watch the contrast between text and background. We have this next example over here where, you know, we have kind of an example of what's going on in the background for good contrast, what's going on with bad contrast. We also, of course, there is a built-in checker in Microsoft Office, which I'm going to show in just a bit, in a few slides from now. But another alternative is the contrast checker. Just web aim. Let's see. So there's a lot of stuff on this web aim checker, just a ton of stuff. But the one that we're focusing on today is a contrast checker. And if you're using Chrome, or I think I'm using the Brave browser here, you get the eyedropper tool. The eyedropper tool doesn't show up in Firefox for some reason. And you can use this to kind of like choose, you know, color on any other window, any other program, or you could just choose kind of like manually. You can say like, let's say if I wanted black text on a good background, and it's going to tell you that it passes the AA standard, but not the AAA standard, right? One of the examples that really surprised me was red text on a white background. And we use this a lot in this is many years ago at this point, but I still use this example. Many years ago, we had this in one of our trainings at EdTech. We had red text, and it was ARC that told us when they reviewed it that, oh, you can't use red text on a white background. And I remember myself and a few others in the EdTech office, we didn't believe it. And then we checked it, and it turned out that it is the case. So sometimes you might want something to stand out a little bit more. So you change the color, but we always have to be thinking about, is there enough contrast? Is this still accessible? So what we ended up doing, we just changed the red a little bit darker. So it still stands out, but we have it accessible. So yeah, this is always a good tool, just to double check. Another idea is something like images with a lot of text, right? So this image, it's just a ton of text. It's the periodic table. And the thing that makes this not accessible, and this is going into our next topic, is that there's nothing really here for a screen reader to see, right? So what a screen reader does is it reads the alternative text out to someone who is visually impaired, or you know, fully visually impaired, like blind or something. And you can't really describe this in a few lines, right? So what is a solution to something like this? Many times you will not have to recreate the periodic table in an accessible format. Same thing with the majority of the content. There is almost always an accessible version already out there. It is very rare. I know we all think we're on the cutting edge and that we're teaching the newest, latest thing, but it is very rare for us to be the first one to encounter a problem that other educators have not encountered yet, and there's no solution for. So there's a periodic table built in HTML5. It's tab delimited, and everything can be read by a screen reader. You can click on the individual elements, and it'll bring you to the next one. So there's almost always already an accessible solution out there for us. It's extremely rare you're going to have to like recreate the wheel, reinvent the wheel. Another thing about color contrast, I always like to use this example. This is the Ishihara test. Dr. Ishihara is or was, I'm not sure if he's still around, is an eye doctor. I think he's from Japan or something. And this was a test for color blindness. So, if you wear corrective lenses and you go for your annual eye doctor checkup, these are the types of things that they show you. And you need to, tell what the number is. And if you cannot, that shows color blindness, right? So someone who has even minor color blindness, this would be difficult for them to see. So you do not want to, because it's low contrast. So you do not want your classroom materials or your homework materials to be written and highlighted in these types of highlights and fonts. And let me show a little bit about, let's actually talk first about the accessibility checker in Microsoft Office. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the tools in Blackboard for accessibility. So many times we'll create a PowerPoint and we'll upload the PowerPoint to Blackboard, or we might upload a PDF version, right? And this is always easier to fix while it's still a PowerPoint. If you have it as a PDF and then you lose the original PowerPoint, which we've encountered, it could be sometimes almost impossible to fix. So I'm in, what version of Office is this? I think this is the one that we get from CUNY for staff and faculty. We have a review tab on top. And when you go to review, and it's always good to have this on right from the beginning. So for this PowerPoint, I have some intentional mistakes for demonstration, also for this demonstration. And it's going to show me the inspection results, right? It's going to give me some warnings, some tips, and some suggestions, right? So the first warning, I get hard to read text contrast, right? So it's going to bring me right to the slide, and I'm going to know it's this right here. So this one is here for demonstration, but it's going to look through all the slides, and it's the same thing in Microsoft Word. It's going to look through all the pages, and it's going to bring you right to where there's a contrast issue, whether it's a font color, the font highlighting, or both, right? So that's always going to show up over there. Here I have one for reading order. So this is something where you would want to check with some type of screen reader just to make sure everything is read in the correct way, right? So if someone's having this slide described to them by a screen reader, of course, we would want them to know that the header logo is first, and then the title, and then the presenters, right? So that's just asking us to check that. Another thing that's a little bit of a no-no for accessibility when it comes to PowerPoints is having duplicate slide titles, right? So the title of this slide is this image accessible? And then we have the same one on the second one, right? So for us, for sighted users, we can see that, okay, it's completely different stuff on both. But imagine if someone's having this described to them, it's very easy to mix it up and say, okay, am I on the same slide? Am I on the next slide? Because it has the same title. So it's always good to, when you have something like this in the same title, to kind of have a part 1, part 2, something like that after. And then we also have suggested alternative text, right? So whenever we post images, we need to have alternative text or a description. That's what the alternative text is. And the way we do that, for example, for this first image, I would right click and go to edit alt text, right? So here, since I did not put alternative text, it's going to generate a description, right? This is the computer, this Microsoft's artificial intelligence. They came up with a description of a set of sunglasses, right? And it knows that it's low confidence. And the thing is, this type of automatically generated alt text or descriptive text is considered not accessible, right? That would not be a fair description to someone who cannot see the image. So I always suggest going in and manually putting a small description. So I'm going to say glasses, right? And you would want to repeat that for, the different images. So I would call this like a blue contact lens case. This one I already put in. This one, look at that description. Horrible automatic description, right? So I would change that to with different colors. Something like that. I keep spelling lenses wrong. And I would repeat that for the other images. Let's see, was there anything else for the PowerPoint checker? Yeah, so like we said earlier, it's always good to have this mindset of accessibility right from the beginning when you're creating the slideshow or the PowerPoint, because the worst thing is to end up with like 50, 60 slides and then run the accessibility checker and you have like 100 things to fix. So, it's a good idea just to have this open right from the beginning.
And David, I have a quick
yes,
question with
of
that,
course.
with your point there. So at the top of it, when you're creating that new PowerPoint, immediately click on, in order to activate it, you just click on review and then check accessibility. You have that open as you're designing the PowerPoint?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so you'll be like, as soon as you make an edit, it will catch it like right away.
Okay, got you.
And that's why I have this checked, keep accessibility checker running while I work, because it's much easier to have this open. Let's say you're picking out the font colors and okay, I have to choose another font color right away. Then let's say if I made a bunch of red text on the white background, and then in the end I have to go to every single slide and change it, I find out at the end. So that's why I suggest just having this open.
Open, yep. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure. And let's see. So I think you already know about our Are You Ready training for students. So let me show a little bit on Blackboard what tools we can use to do the same thing, such as providing alternative text. So here we are. Did I close the tab? I think I did close the tab. Let me log back into Blackboard. Just give me a second, please. All right, here we go. All right, so this is my Blackboard sandbox. So a few things that I've uploaded are some of these images, and I also talk about the WebAIM contrast checker. So we can change colors of the text in Blackboard. Blackboard does not have a built-in checker like Microsoft Word, so I usually like to be a little bit more conservative with my color choices. I'll just stick to basics. But again, we can always use that WebAIM color contrast checker to double check. So for images, the way I uploaded these images, I went to build content and then image, right? If you're uploading a Word file and that you already checked for accessibility, you don't need to worry about how it looks on Blackboard because they're just going to download it and open it. But if you end up uploading documents, we do suggest saving it as PDF just so it's more universal. But for any image that you're uploading directly on Blackboard, you want to go over here to the little chevron, little down arrow, and we have in the edit options, we have an area for alternative text, and you also have an area for a longer description. So I just have the description, a happy gray cat getting a chin rub. So that's the alternative text. Now, The long description would be more for if you had an image with a lot of text. And by a lot of text, I'm talking anything more than 1 or 2 sentences. That's considered a lot of text. For something like that, I highly recommend just retyping the text in Blackboard, putting it after the image if that's something that you have to have. And again, anything like a periodic table, obviously that we would want to stay away from stuff like that. Any image with that type of text, we need to find something else. And when it comes to links, we, instead of like having this long link, it's better to have one like this, right? Because the screen reader is going to read this out, https://, right? Whereas this is just linked to New York Times article, and it's going to tell them that article is a link. They can click on that, and it's going to take them to the article. And of course, you want everything well organized and all of that, like in folders. That also helps with accessibility. I think those are all the tips I have for Blackboard without really like taking a big detour. So yeah, pretty much in Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, we want to use that accessibility checker under review. And in Blackboard, we want to utilize the hyperlinks. When we make proper hyperlinks, we want to make sure we use fonts and font colors conservatively. We don't want to go too crazy with the design, and we want to make sure we add alternative text for images. And once we talk about, as we talk about uploading documents, it's a good idea to have them as PDFs. PDFs, they're just more universal. And Michael's going to tell us a little bit about working with PDFs if that's all we have to work with and we want to improve the accessibility of PDFs.
Yeah, definitely. So let me share my screen again.
Stop my share.
Okay. So with PDFs, if you already did all the steps that David already talked about earlier in Microsoft Word or in PowerPoint, as in changing the color, making sure everything is organized, adding alternative text, when you export it over to a PDF version, 99% of the time that those steps that you took previously is going to carry over. So you don't need to do it twice for 2 different file types. But there may be times where either you lose the original document or you scan a document like through an actual printer and you save it as a PDF. Now, in those particular cases, you would have to make the PDF accessible. So right here, as an example, this PDF document that I have is a scanned PDF document. So scanned PDF documents are basically, just imagine it as you taking a screenshot. So if you take a screenshot and you're taking an image, a lot of times, because it's in that format as a scanned PDF document, screen readers won't know what's going on the screen. So you have to help the screen reader understand what's text, what's an image, and help it organize a little bit better. So to get started, first things first, I just want to show you what a screen reader sounds like. So if you don't have a screen reader, or if you don't know what a screen reader is, basically what that is, it's a piece of software that some students that are visually impaired, most of the time blind students to a certain extent would use that. And basically the computer would read out every single thing that's on the screen for them. So I'm using Adobe Acrobat Pro. We do have it available to all host staff. If you do not have it, you can reach out to the IT department and they could give you a license for this to use on your host's computer. So in this program, if you want to go to view and you want to press read out loud, because you want the program to be able to read what's on the screen. So let's do that. Okay, so I press activate and that's going to press read this page.
Warning, empty page.
So I don't know if you were able to hear it. David or Professor Miller, were you able to hear it?
Yeah, we were able to hear it.
Okay, awesome. So that's
Yes.
pretty much what a screen reader is going to tell you. So right now, the screen reader is saying that this is an empty page. Now, you and I are looking at this can clearly see that this is not an empty page. So what we want to do is just begin to convert it into a more accessible format that the screen reader can interact with it and read it. Another easy way to know if a screen reader would be able to read something is if you could highlight it. So for example, I'm clicking anywhere on this paragraph and I can't interact with the text, meaning I can't highlight it, I can't copy paste it. Typically, if you could interact with a text in terms like I could highlight something and I could copy paste it, a lot of times the screen reader will also be able to extract that same information and read it back to you. Now, if you can't do that, that's another sign that this PDF document is not accessible. And then the third option to check accessibility is that on the right-hand side, we have an accessibility option right here. When you open the program for the first time, this may not pop up for you. So to get it situated on your end, you press More Tools, and then just look for the little accessibility button and press Add. And then once you add it for the first time, it's going to be there every single time you open your Acrobat Pro. So I'm going to click that. And similarly to Microsoft Office and Microsoft PowerPoint, there is a built-in accessibility checker. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to press Start Checking. And then the left-hand side is going to tell us every single thing wrong with this specific page. So this is just one page. If you have a multiple page document, I would highly recommend doing these things in the original Microsoft PowerPoint or Microsoft Word, because it's a lot easier to do it beforehand before exporting. So let's just see a couple of the issues. So right now, there's an image, it's not tagged. The color contrast needs to be checked. There's no alternative text. There's a table at the bottom not properly formatted, and so forth. So there's about 20 different issues. A lot of times we can actually fix those issues in just a couple of steps. So the first thing that I want to do, let's go back to the right-hand side. Let's press Scan and OCR. So we're going to click this. And what this does is just convert the text into a format that the screen reader can read. Now to do that, we're just going to press Recognize Text. And if you have multiple files, you click multiple files, but for now, we're just working with one file. So I'm clicking in this file. I'm going to click Recognize Text. So it's going to take a second. And now,
30 The dimensions of health.
you notice just by doing that, I could instantly start clicking any section.
Cooperation and helping others builds relationships.
And it starts reading it back to me.
Real person. Authentic friends are more spontaneous and less calculating.
Okay, so we want us to read it from the beginning because there's one thing that we want to look out for. So I'm going to press Read. I'm going to press Read this page.
30 The dimensions of health. Cooperation and helping others builds relationships. Real person. Authentic friends are more spontaneous and less calculating.
Okay, so we're going to stop it. So that was a pretty good example of what a screen reader would typically sound like. Now it read from the top, this little text right here, and then continue to the paragraph. But you notice that it skipped the little image right here. So similarly to Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, you want to make sure to include alternative text in that. So to do that, it's pretty simple. You go back to the accessibility features and you see the option that says set alternative text. So we're just going to click that. And that's going to ask us if just to confirm. So it's going to do a scan of the entire document and automatically pull any images for us. So I'm going to press OK. But even though we pressed OK, it still gave us an error message saying that there's no figure information to display. So you're probably wondering, like, why did that happen? So you and I could clearly see that there's an image, but for some reason, the program is not picking that image up. So we want to fix that. So with PDF documents specifically, that you have to convert into accessible format, you have to identify to the program what's a title, what's a paragraph, what's an image, and so forth. Now you can do that really easily just by pressing Autotag document. So when we tag the document, it's automatically going to mark title, paragraph, image, and so forth. And on the left-hand side, it's going to tell us that we're missing an alternative text for one of the images. So now if we go back to set alternative text, I'm going to press OK. And now that image instantly got highlighted for me. And I could type in any description I want for it. So I'm going to type in 2-man carrying wooden box into truck. And press save. So now we're just going to go back and we want the program to read it back to us just so we can hear what it sounds like.
30. The dimensions of health. Cooperation and helping others builds relationships. 2 men carrying wooden box into truck. Real person.
Okay, so just like that, because we added the alternative text, it instantly began reading the image description that we put. So if a visually impaired person or a blind person notice that there's an image, that little description helps them identify what that image is exactly. So now, the next thing that we want to cover is this part right here, the text and this little table right here. So I'm gonna scroll down.
Health writer Florence Isaacs, 1 p.m. Kim asks Chris if he would.
So you
Health
notice
writer
how
Florence
right here,
Isaacs, 1999,
let me
suggest.
stop this. So you notice at the end of this paragraph, it automatically jumps to the table. Now, logically reading, for most text documents that we read, we typically read from left to right. But in this document in particular, based on the context, we actually want to read the right part first and then the table second. Now, a screen reader won't know this based on it doesn't account for context. So you have to help the screen reader identify the order of things that are meant to be read. Now, in this particular document, if you want to go ahead and fix that, under the same accessibility options that we have, we could go to reading options right here. And we're going to press start. Actually, I meant reading order. So reading order, that's what we want, because we want to change the order. And we want to press show order panel. So once you click show order panel, we're going to notice that it's going to tell us the order that it's reading thing. So typically screen readers by default would read from top to bottom, left to right. So you notice that number 1 is marked 1, number 2 is the paragraph, number 3 is the third paragraph, and number 4 is actually the image. Now, if you remembered before, it actually read the image correctly, even though it's marked as number 4. So based on the screen reader, we have it set to override in the sense that we want it to read from top to bottom to left to right. So that ended up overriding the section that says number 4 because it read from top to bottom. Now that same logic won't apply at the bottom right here because we don't want the left side to be read first. We actually want the right side to be read first. So to fix that easily, while we have the reading order page open, we just have to drag it to the spot before. So right now we want number 7 to be read before number 5 and 6. So we're gonna take number 7 and just drag it all the way up to 5 and 6. And that instantly changed the reading order for us. And while we're here, we might as well fix the little image too, just so it's in the correct spot. So we want number 4 to be read before number 3. So I'm just gonna drag number 4 and we're gonna move that up to number 3 spot. So now everything else correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the right hand side, 6 and 7. So we're gonna close that. And now let's go back to read it.
Health
so it goes
writer
here,
Florence Isaacs, 1.
and then 1. So it instantly jumps from health writer, and once that's being finished reading, it goes to the right-hand side, which is exactly how we want. So we're gonna go down, keep on
Don't
scrolling,
betray it. 2.
just fast forward a little bit.
Reciprocate. Spend time together.
And as soon as it's
Kim
done,
asks Chris if he
it
would
jumps
like
to
to
the
go
correct
to a
spot.
movie. He could answer in many ways.
So we took a lot of steps. So let's just recap what we did. So the first thing that we did was just go to scan and OCR. We press recognize text. Second thing that we did was press Autotag document, which helps the program identify what's a title, what's a text, what's an image. The next thing that we did was set alternative text. And then the last thing that we did was just change the reading order so the screen reader knows which order to read things. So let's go back to the accessibility checker. And let's see how many things that we fixed. So right now we use 4 different tools, 3 or 4 different tools. So let's just check the accessibility checker again. And right now we had about 20 and now there's only 4 left. So I'm gonna click that and see what's the last 4 that's left. So logical reading order. So we already checked that. So we could just press right click and we could pass that. So language, same thing, right click, and I'm gonna press fix. So depending on your screen reader that you have, some students may have it set to a different language if they're in another country. So we want to help set the program and set the language to default to English. Title, same thing, right click, fix. So the title would be their title up here. So right here, if you're making any file at all, where it says scan 35110471, when you're sending that to a student, you always want to make sure to add the appropriate title of the PDF document, because if a student is using a screen reader for their software, on their computer, all they're going to hear is that this is a attachment called scan 35110471, and they may not know what that is. So adding a proper title would definitely go a long way for any file you use. And then color contrast, we have white on black. So the color contrast is all good. So you can right click and we could pass it. So just in those quick little steps, now we have a fully accessible PDF document, and you can send this through email or even upload it to Blackboard, and it'll keep all those same changes that you did before. And that would conclude our PDF demonstration. All right, David, back to you.
All right, thank you so much for that. Let's see. So I guess this is now time for our feedback or questions. Also, please complete our survey, which is in the workshop calendar, the same place you signed up for today. There's going to now be a link to the to the feedback survey that helps us improve our future workshops and plan our future workshops. Also, you'll be getting a badge for attending. And yeah, any questions, comments, or anything like that, Professor Miller?
No, that was very helpful, like a lot of great, wonderful information. So I'm grateful and appreciate both of you. So yeah, definitely I will, what Michael just shared with the PDFs is really helpful to ensure, because I feel as though some of my PDFs definitely are not not fully accessible. So I definitely will employ some of or not some, all of the tools. Just a quick question back to like the WebAIM tool. That's just once we pull that up, that's a click and drag. Is that, David? Is that what you did with the colors? You clicked and dragged down to the pass and fail area?
Yes.
I wasn't okay.
Okay, let me pull that up.
I think I have an example I could show using WebAIM.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, I could definitely show it. Just give me a second. Cool. So I have WebAIM pulled up, the same website that David used. So the left-hand side is WebAIM, and on the right-hand side, we have just a couple of samples. So right here, we just want to click the background. So I'm going to click the background and click the little eyedropper tool. And now let's go to the second one. So the background would be the black color right here. And then same thing, the foreground. So click it, eyedropper tool, and click the little white text. Let me see, I get a spot. Cool. And then instantly by clicking it, it's going to tell us whether it passed the normal text or passed the large text. And same thing for graphics. So graphics would be like logos, images, and stuff like that. So we could do the same thing for like the third one. So click the blue as the background. And then for the foreground would be a text color. It's like the yellow, for example. And that's going to show us whether it passes or fail. So the blue on the yellow, that's going to be a no-go. It's going to fail. And same thing if you're using like backgrounds, like textures or images in your PowerPoints, same exact thing. So like this one has multiple colors. So for example, you may choose like the darkest color on here versus the white. So that's complete white. And you notice that it fails too. Same thing if we choose a different color, like the lightest color on that image, it still fails too. So definitely having multiple colors. Text on a background with very busy colors, that's a no-go. So if you can, definitely some colors. Yep, so that's pretty much how it works.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
No problem. you have any other questions? Even about your students' accommodations, I could at least answer any questions that you may have.